Okay, well, then let me call the meeting to order of the Measure S Oversight Committee, Thursday, February 18th at 6:12 p.m. All right, and let me get to my agenda because I clicked my agenda off. Excuse me.
The next agenda item is just roll call. So I'll go ahead and call roll.
Thank you very much.
Committee Chair Nash.
Present.
Vice Chair Hedges.
Present.
Committee member, I'm sorry, is it Shu, Naomi?
Yes, here.
Okay. Committee member Morgan.
Present.
Committee member Simonitis.
Here.
Okay, all committee members are present.
Great. And then we have the Pledge of Allegiance. So repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
Thank you. So now it's time for public comment. Persons wishing to comment on any item not appearing on the agenda may submit to staff a request to speak form. State law prevents the committee from taking any action on any matter not on the agenda. Your comments may be referred to staff for further review. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment?
I see no attendees who wish to speak.
Okay, well then let me close public comment and let's move on to new business. So our first item of new business is the election of officers for the election of chair and vice chair for the calendar year 2021. So I'm downloading my PDF. Give me 1 second. So currently, the chair of the committee is Lisa Diaz-Nash, and the vice chair is Richard W. Hedges. Is there any discussion, or can I entertain any suggestions as to the chair and vice chair for calendar year 2021?
Chair Nash, I have my hand raised.
You're recognized.
We're on the also the Neighborhood Watch Board, and we decided to move the current chair of that board through for another year because we've virtually got to do nothing because of COVID this year. And I would entertain a motion to continue you as chair with no objections from the other membership.
Okay, thank you for that. Does anyone else have any comments or wish to make any other?
I second Rich's motion.
Thank you. Any other suggestions for nomination? Okay, then I think the one suggestion, the one motion is that Lisa Diaz-Nash continue as chair for the coming year. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any?
Point of clarification.
Yes, sir.
I think when we're on video, we have to do
A roll call. Okay, good point. Thank you, Rich, very much. So Erin, can you please do a roll call for us?
Of course. Committee Chair Nash.
Aye.
Vice Chair Hedges.
aye.
Committee member Shu.
Aye.
Committee member Morgan.
Aye.
Committee member Simonitis.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much. And now let's move on to vice chair. And in keeping with what Rich said, I would nominate Rich to continue as vice chair so that he actually has a year where perhaps he can affect some change. So I would put that motion in. Is there any discussion? Naomi wants to second. Thank you. Any other discussion or nominations? No? Okay, then Erin, could you please do a roll call?
Of course. Committee Chair Nash.
Aye.
Vice Chair Hedges,
Aye.
Committee Member Shu,
Aye.
Committee Member Morgan,
Aye.
Committee Member Simonitis.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Aye. Sorry.
Thank you. So thank you all. Let's go get some good work done this year. So let's move on to the Measure S long-term plan update, which I believe is not my presentation, but Rich's.
Good evening, Chair Diaz-Nash, members of the Measure S Oversight Committee, Rich Lee, I'm the city's finance director. The item before you this evening is first an update on Measure S's long-term financial plan, and then we'll get into some funding requests from both Parks and Recreation and Public Works. So a brief look at Measure S revenues, where they've been, and this is by business type and where we believe they're going to be. So what you can see, what I consider the 2018-19 pre-pandemic baseline, and the impact of essentially 1 quarter's worth of pandemic to the city's Measure S revenues. And what we're looking at based on our sales tax consultants' estimates is about a 3-year recovery. So a 3-year recovery from the 2018-19 baseline and when it's going to return to that level in 2023. One thing I want to contrast, and you may have seen it in the mid-year budget that I presented to the council, was Measure S is a transactions and use tax. And there's a difference in terms of state law from the 1% Bradley Burns, that's the Bradley Burns uniform sales and use tax, and the transactions and use tax, which falls under district tax. The primary difference is that district tax is destination based. So what that means is there's been a noticeable uptick in online transactions because of COVID. And with Bradley Burns, we only see roughly 10 to 11% of that because of the way that use tax is allocated to municipalities in San Mateo County and throughout the state. For this Measure S transactions and use tax, San Mateo gets 100% of transactions that are subject to that. So that's one of the reasons why, especially in general retail, that sector has not been as impacted in Measure S as it has been with the local 1%. Looking at the long-term financial plan as a
Can I
whole.
ask a question, Rich, on that before you
Please. Yes, go ahead.
Could you go back to it? The only one of those categories that never recovers to 2018-19 levels is transportation, all the way out to 24-25. And could you just address why, or what goes into where the funds come from on that transportation component and why it's not rebounding?
So the majority of the transportation taxable sales comes from gasoline, and essentially what this is projecting is that gasoline prices will not recover until that time. Whether or not that's going to be close to reality, I couldn't even begin to imagine. But that's what our consultants believe is going to happen in terms of recovery.
There may even be some electric car increases over that time period that have some effect on that as well. Okay, thank you.
And
Thanks for your
Rich,
question.
do you have a question? Vice Chair? Rich, do you have a question? You are still muted.
My hand's up from previous time.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, then I have a question. The difference between the 2021 estimated, has this changed in the past 6 months, the estimated? Because I know you've been going back and forth.
It's changed a little bit, and the complexity with the projections, one comes from the essentially the extension that the state has provided to small businesses in terms of delaying reporting of their sales and use tax. Two, because of that, some businesses, instead of reporting Q1 when they normally would have reported it, are instead doubling up in the following quarter. So that makes projecting where they're going to be by the end of the fiscal year a little difficult. If I can very clearly recall the Bradley Burns, but I honestly can't remember what the Measure S projection difference is. For Bradley Burns, it was a difference of about $700,000 to the good. Our concern in finance was based on the Q2, so it's 2020 calendar year Q2 sales tax report, where we're looking like we were going to be about $1 million short of what the budget was. And the budget even accounted for anticipated losses in sales tax. But the consultant cautioned us by saying, we do expect the Q3 estimate to be higher, and it's to account for those sales tax deferrals that were allowed by the state. And true to form, when we got the reports in early January for Q3, the year-end estimates for sales tax were about $700,000 more. And when you do a comparison for both Bradley Burns and Measure S, that we're looking essentially at what we had assumed in the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions on the revenue side?
I do have my hand up now.
Okay, please.
So, and looking through this, maybe just I couldn't figure it out, where the Wayfair decision, the online sales tax, is that lumped in with the Bradley Burns?
It is, and that's a great question. So one of the benefits of the Wayfair decision is that there was essentially online retailers were not only compelled, but now required to collect use tax. This goes back to Governor Brown, that it really started with Amazon, where they came to an agreement, I think it was 2015 or 2016, where they struck an agreement where they would collect sales and use tax for since they constitute a large majority of online commerce. And then the Wayfair decision came, and that's at the national level through the Supreme Court. But it was not all immediate. It was more of a phased-in approach. So what happened in October of 2019 was the kind of the last leg of the phased-in approach with the Wayfair decision, where online retailers, and basically these are marketplace facilitators is the technical term. So these are businesses that do third-party transactions through Amazon or through or Wayfair, or I'm drawing a blank on the name of the business in San Mateo. But essentially, these are third-party transactions where before Wayfair, they were not required to collect sales tax and use tax. And now, because of that marketplace facilitator phased-in approach of the Wayfair decision, now they are. That tax only it gets funneled in through the county pool. So I mentioned previously that the county pool is basically all use tax, and there's not a 1-to-1 ratio there because it's not destination based. So the way that state law is written, the use tax is allocated to all of the municipalities in each county based on their proportional share of the Bradley Burns. For San Mateo, over the past 5 years, that's averaged somewhere between 11, maybe 12% on a good quarter. So it's, yes, San Mateo has certainly benefited from the provisions of the Wayfair decision, but it's not a 1-to-1 ratio because of the limitations of Bradley Burns. Rich is certainly aware of the efforts at the state level with the Senate to try and get destination-based sales tax allocation. It hasn't really had much traction. I think there have been renewed efforts, especially in the current pandemic environment, to try and get that moving forward, but I'm not aware of any success yet, but I'm certainly hopeful.
If I may, Richard, just a projection.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at what it costs now to shop online, with sales tax plus delivery charges, which can run from about 3 to 10% of an item that runs you around $100, depending on the length of time you need in getting the. I think we're going to see some people moving back to that are now shopping online. I'll be one of them to box retail. And I've also had the experience of something not being what it was purported to be when I saw it online and sending it back. I can't imagine others not having the same. Whereas when you're shopping in a store, you pretty well know when you leave whether it's what you're looking for or not. And so that cuts out having to. Plus, there's a charge when you send it back usually too. The other thing is, I'm trying to think of the senator's name. I don't
I think it's
I've mentioned-
Hertzberg.
Yeah, that's it. He's also trying to restructure the sales tax. Are you familiar with that?
Last I heard, he was trying to get sales tax applied to services, and it was about a 3.75% rate, but there was no benefit to the local municipalities. It was all for the state. That's why it didn't go anywhere.
So I actually, amazingly, got to spend about maybe 15 minutes with Laura Tyson when she was here in San Mateo County. And in my conversation with her, the way we collect sales tax came up. And her comment was, we have to change it or the cities are going to go broke. Or words to that effect. I don't think that's a direct quote. But just to give you an example, the county I come from in Kansas City is the poorest county in Kansas City, actually the poorest county in the state. And they have a 10.5% sales tax, higher than ours, and it's on everything, services, food, and medicine. And we could lower the overall sales tax because according to Tyson, as we go forward, 80% of the economy is going to be on services. And a diminishing amount of it is going to be on goods. So as a percentage. So she really believes that if we don't restructure the sales tax, and I think we could substantially lower it, which would benefit retailers and still have more money in the pot with services. So unlike what most people think, our sales tax really isn't as high as people think it is because it's not like almost every other state in the country that has a sales tax and it's on everything. So I'm hopeful that, and of course, everybody's suspicious when you try to do that. They know what they've got. So it's going to be a difficult lift, but I think it would be beneficial to consumers as well as to government to do it. Anyway, that's all I've got to say on that. If you got some comments, I'd love to hear them.
I was going to add, this was a number of, I'd say about 3 years ago, I had a conversation with the same consultant. So I came from South San Francisco and had a conversation when Senator Hertzberg was again trying to advance the idea of a tax on services. And the question that I posed to the consultant was, if we were to lower the sales tax rate and have it, broaden the tax base, what would that do in terms of the city's total overall sales tax revenues? And their estimate was that even though the tax rate would be lowered, but it would be broadened in terms of the tax base, that the city could be looking at doubling its sales tax revenues.
Exactly.
But your guess is as good as mine as to the future prospects of that actually happening in the legislature.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks for your questions. Any other comments before I move on? Not seeing any. Okay. So my final part in the presentation is to look at the overall long-term financial plan. So this takes our audited financials from fiscal year 1920, beginning and ending balances of those, our current revenue projections from our sales tax advisors, and then kind of breaks down the expenditures by when I say total expenditures, I mean operating expenditures, and then showing in detail what are transfers out from the Measure S fund to debt service. In particular, these are the debt service payments for the smooth streets and the North Shore View flood control improvements, as well as the CIP contributions from this fund, as well as the payback of the loan from the general fund. So total transfers out for the next foreseeable future. And what that leaves, and which I've highlighted in yellow, is about $800,000 in additional capacity that we have for years 1 through 4. And that's really why I've invited my colleagues from Public Works and Parks and Recreation to provide some one-time funding for CIP projects. And one of the reasons why we're looking at one-time funding versus ongoing operating obligations is really to hedge against the volatility of the pandemic. Right now, this is the best guess as to where revenues are headed. However, we don't want to overcommit. You notice that we leave some in ending fund balance. So it's prudent for us to look at funding one-time projects versus ongoing operating costs. And I'm going to pause here to see if there's any questions. But if not, I'm going to hand it over to our Parks and Recreation Director, Sheila Kanzian.
I do have just a quick question, and it's just to refresh my memory. In the past 2 years, have we used the additional capacity to fund any ongoing projects?
We have, if you recall, last year, Parks and Recreation requested, and I'm taking a random guess as to what the amount was, but it was to enhance the senior transportation because there was a greater demand than when the program first began. And then there was also mobile recreation. And if I recall correctly, Sheila, it was additional per diem staff. Is my memory correct?
It included additional per diem staff and then additional amounts for the taxi provider that does the senior transportation.
Great. But that was obviously pre-pandemic, and now that we're in the pandemic, we want to make sure that we reserve these additional capacities for one-time projects. That way, if for some reason revenues end up being worse than we thought, we can defer these projects to a future year until the economy recovers. Thank you for the question. Any other questions from the committee before I hand it off to?
I think Rich has a question.
Yes.
No, I do not. I'm usually used to someone within the organization shutting my hand off. I have to remember.
I can do that. No problem. I think.
Well, then I
did it.
have a question, Rich, as in Rich Lee.
Yes, please.
I recall the last time we reviewed opportunities for additional project funding, it was Parks and Rec, Public Works, and the library. And I'm wondering why it's only Parks and Rec and Public Works this time.
So we discussed that at the CIP committee. So the CIP committee is the city manager, the assistant city manager, myself, Sheila, Azalea, and the library CIP requests. And I'm looking at Azalea to correct me if I'm wrong, but those are included as a part of the overall CIP funding requests. And I'm not aware of any new ads that have been added to the CIP process this year, but I could be mistaken.
Yes, no, you are correct, Rich. They are. So the additional capacity, then the focus is for that one-time funding for Parks and Public Works, but library improvements are included in the CIP, and there were no additional requests from Measure S.
And did somebody just confirm that with James Moore?
He's part of the committee as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to, Sheila, I'm going to be controlling the slides, and then you can do the narration. So we're going with Parks and Recreation.
So good evening, members of the committee. I appreciate you considering the requests. And this is really, I think, a Parks and Recreation and Public Works request. I'm representing the user side of it, which is obviously the park restrooms. So about 6 years ago, under former city manager Larry Patterson, he made a commitment to try and remodel our park restrooms. And it didn't take much convincing for Larry when we started to show pictures of the existing conditions of our restrooms. And so we have successfully started that project. We are now in phase 4. And so what we are looking for is to fully fund improvements and remodel for the next phase of restrooms, which are at Indian Springs, Fiesta Meadows, and Casanova. And so the first pictures on the top give you just a sample of what our existing conditions look like. I believe the one on the left is Indian Springs, and I believe the one on the right may be Fiesta Meadows. So those are the next 3 on the list. They are partially funded by the general fund, but I think what's really important for us is that when we started the very first phase, we came up with a series of recommendations for materials inside the restrooms that were relatively vandal proof. And I've lived through a good number of restroom remodels in my career, and I can say without hesitation that the current set of materials that we have been using are by far the most vandal proof of anything we have ever used. So the 2 pictures on the bottom are existing restrooms that have been remodeled. And you can really kind of see the difference in terms of the wall material that we're using is a product called Neolith. It is virtually indestructible. When people do decide to spray paint on it, we just really take a rag and wash it off. The floors are all epoxy, which makes it really easy to clean. And then unlike, and I know that there's one picture there of the sink, but the new sinks that we have been installing don't have any, they are draining into the sink well themselves. So there's not a lot of extra room for splatter. So I think that's the reason why, given this next phase, that we are currently short in terms of continuing on by using the same material. And I think that's the request that we're asking for tonight. And I'm certainly happy to answer any questions.
Do you have a question?
So Naomi.
Do you have a sense of maybe the annual cost of addressing vandalism?
You know, we don't. And really, I think we have to look to our friends in Public Works, because whenever there is vandalism repair, other than minor things that maybe our own park staff can take care of. So if they walk into a restroom and find that, you know, it's been slightly graffitied or whatever, that might be something that we can take care of, then we do. Any other major vandalism, we put a work order in through Public Works, and that's how they track it. And so we could certainly go back and look to see what the vandalism rate has been on the newer restrooms. I think just, and this is really just more of an anecdotal comment, but we've had lots of people who have walked into our restrooms, and I think the sense that they actually look better makes it feel as though you don't want to vandalize them.
Sheila, is there any changes to the equipment design, et cetera, driven by the pandemic to think about going forward? You know, completely touchless fixtures, are they already included in all of this, and other things like that that maybe have changed in terms of needs?
You know, Vince, I don't know whether the fixtures that we have installed in the previous remodels are touchless or not. But certainly I think that's a really good suggestion in terms of considerations moving forward.
And can I ask Sheila, the additional funding, it's a fairly wide range. So does that mean you do just one or you do all 3? How did you come to that range?
So I don't know, Azalea, if maybe you can, I'll pitch this one to you, because I just provided the pictures. I didn't come up with the estimates.
Okay, thank you. Is
I
that
am on mute. Yes, I am on mute. Apologies. The range, the higher range reflects what Sheila is showing you in the pictures, the tile work. So that is the higher end. The other options, we did explore other less expensive options, which the least expensive is an epoxy on the walls. However, as Sheila noted, in terms of vandalism, and really, keeping the restrooms in a condition that people would want to, keep them pristine and well maintained. So we explored a number of options, but the pictures there show the more expensive option.
And you're thinking the three as a package. We either do all three or we don't do any, or how is that?
Yes, it is the plan is to remodel all three.
Okay, great. And so if this funding doesn't happen, then these restrooms don't get updated.
Then we don't have the complete funding. Exactly.
So
then we
you would, on same line, that's what I was thinking too. Would you do 2 of 3? You would do 3 with the lower grade materials? How would you approach it based on where you current stand in terms of funding and what supplemental funding you might or might not get?
Yes, absolutely. So a question that was raised in terms of, for example, COVID, there's also uncertainty in material costs. So the request is really for you all to approve a range in funding so that we can finalize the costs. And then if there are certain changes that we have to make because we don't have additional funding, then we would. But the intent here is to be able to do the improvements to all three.
So
I'm sorry, and I would just add that if we weren't able to get the full funding that we needed, I think there would be 2 considerations. One is that which of the 3 restrooms are the worst? And so we would want to start with the worst restrooms first. And the second one, and I may be a lone voice on this, but and we had this discussion with our public works friends, I am not in support of changing out materials to lesser quality than what we have been using. If it means that we have to delay a restroom later to be able to find the money to use to be able to get the surfaces that we have found really work the best, that would be my recommendation. There may be others that would say, hey, regardless of going back to these materials, any improvement is a better improvement over what you currently have. And that's certainly not a wrong argument. I think that the other side is that we also then would likely end up spending more money on cleaning and repairing vandalism.
And if I may add, our projects still have to go through the CIP process and through council. So there are quite a few decisions along the way. And so we're trying to finalize the costs. And to Sheila's point, it's we would like to meet all the requirements, but indeed, if we can only have the funding to do 2, then that decision will be made later through the CIP process.
great. Thank you. Any other questions? Rich?
Yeah, I know how important restrooms are. Sheila knows we spent about 35 years parking in my house without one. So I'm very pro restroom. Couple of questions. What is the stretch of time that we're looking at doing these 3, Sheila?
Well, I think that they would be funded during this next fiscal year. So anytime between July 1st and June 30th of 2022. What we've tried to do, just from simply trying to minimize disruption to the public, is where possible, we'd like to do them in the off season so that we're not closing restrooms in our parks during the high season when there's the most use.
So I am curious. I completely remodeled a fairly large restroom at my house with some pretty expensive stuff and painted two fairly large rooms and with high ceilings and put in a wood floor in a large family room for about $36,000. So could you give us a breakdown on why it's $480,000 for 3 restrooms?
Sheila, would you like me to take that? Yeah, so I can certainly provide you with that information. I do have, I don't have the entire breakdown of the, for each restroom, but I can definitely follow up with you. What is being presented to you in terms of additional funding did focus on the materials for the walls, and that is a range between using epoxy to the tile work. But yes, I can definitely follow up with a full breakdown.
Well, I'm obviously going to be very pro doing it. I just want to do it with a good financial idea of what it's going to cost us overall. And also, I want the material to be non-porous because it's so much easier to disinfect. And I want it to be easy to disinfect. So, and I probably would think that Sheila would make sure that's in the plans. Is it, Sheila?
Well, and I think to your point, Rich, and yes, thank you. I mean, we have been cleaning the restrooms that have been remodeled. We have been successfully cleaning them during this pandemic period. And so I think that we have a really good track record in terms of being able to keep up with the disinfectant. As you can see, it really is in some of these other areas where we have some of that tile work up in the top right-hand corner, and chipped counters and things like that. That just becomes more problematic from a cleaning perspective.
Right. And larger tile in that works better too, I think, because it's fewer places for bacteria to seep in. Okay, I think that's all of my questions.
Okay, does anyone else have any other questions? Nope. All right, then please continue.
So the next one project that we have been looking at is to provide a gender neutral facility at Joinville. And this would really allow families who maybe have a mother that comes with a 6 or 7 year old son, or a father that comes with a 6 or 7 year old daughter. The way that our current Joinville facility was built, and this goes back to the 1960s, was you have one entry door for women and you have one entry door for men. And if you are a mother bringing your 6 or 7 year old son to swimming lessons or direct swim, you kind of have two choices. You either let him wander through the men's restroom on his own, or you bring your son through the women's restroom, change him, and then go out to the pool deck. And obviously, conversely, if you are a father bringing a 6 or 7 year old daughter for swim lessons, the same two choices. You let the daughter go through the women's restroom and hopefully find her way out to the deck. And as the father, or you can bring your daughter through the male restroom as well. So this is the current condition that we have at Joinville Pool. And I think that this kind of gives you an existing plan on the left-hand side of the current women's restroom. And so what we are proposing to do on the right-hand side is, if you can see up in that top right-hand corner where it says family changing room, you're then able to enter from the women's restroom door, go down a hallway, and go take your family into the family changing room without going through either the men's locker room or the women's locker room. So this is a project that we have been trying to get completed now for a good number of years. And I think that not only the sensitivity in terms of families, and so what it means to try to bring your family through one or the other of a locker room, but even I think the much more heightened sensitivity for gender identity and providing a safe place where people don't have to make a choice. And so this is the project, and this is again a more expensive project because, as you can see, it's relocating where our existing toilets are and our sinks, and to try to make that hallway entry one that doesn't go into the locker room currently, but then provide a changing room, a shower, and a toilet. So anything that needs to be done by that family or by that individual can be done in that one changing facility. So that's the proposal that we currently have partial funding for and would like to continue to find full funding for it so that we can complete this project.
Okay, Rich Hedges, do you have a question or is your hand just still up?
I'm actually ready to make a motion if Sheila's would entertain it, or Richard.
All right.
So we have a few more projects to present to the
Okay.
committee for your consideration.
Okay, sorry, I thought we were done.
Any
So
other questions
before
for
I leave,
Sheila?
any questions on this project?
I don't see it.
We toured that during the Park and Rec overview we did, Sheila, so I'm pretty familiar with it.
Thanks, Rich.
Okay, on we go then.
So, one last question for Sheila, not related to either of those projects, but with the extra funding that was provided last time for the senior transportation effort. So with the pandemic, I imagine that money was not spent with the transportation. So what is the plan in terms of how that money would be used? How much is available?
So that was rolled into our operating budget. And so Rich Lee, I don't think that, I mean, any money that we don't spend, I don't know how that gets accounted for at the end of this fiscal year. Vince, you're absolutely correct, is that the demand for transportation services did not grow at the rate that we had anticipated a year ago. So and I expect that there will be some fund balance left over in the operating area for the transportation program, but I don't know how those funds would either go back to the fund balance or just roll over for the second year.
Yeah, that's what I was asking. Do you know, Rich?
So we're working right now with Parks and Recreation, and actually tomorrow is the due date for their revised budget. Hint, hint, Sheila. But we're expecting their input on any revisions to their operating budget for the fiscal year 2022. And I don't know, honestly, if they've made any changes to that projection. What I can say is that essentially if a program had funding in 2021, we didn't make, as a part of last year's budget, we didn't make any reductions in fiscal year 2022. So if it has funding for senior transportation and enhanced at the recommendation of the committee, then presumably it's going to be in fiscal year 2022 unless they make conscious efforts to reduce it because of the anticipated reduction in demand.
I guess the point or the question is whether funds that we approve for a specific purpose or project don't get used for that particular purpose or project because of circumstances such as we're in now. What is the view as to what happens to those? Do they need to be reserved for that same purpose later? Do they get held? Do they get turned back? There's a whatever. If they would be used for something else, it would be contrary to what the recommendation and decision was in terms of a special allocation. It's a little different than a normal budget where some specific need is identified and an allocation is made from this particular program. So, I mean, there may be other things like that. It'd be good to have some principle, I guess, that exists related to it.
A good question.
So to answer your question, with the exception of signed contracts, so we're talking purchase orders really, and CIP projects, those appropriations are carried over each fiscal year. Any appropriations other than that, especially operating, those lapse at the end of every fiscal year. But to your point, I don't recall the exact amount that was budgeted for senior transportation. I do recall that there was an increase amount somewhere between $75,000 and $100,000 to increase for the current fiscal year. And as I mentioned before, if there was an increase in 2021 before the pandemic, we would have carried that. Basically, it had the same assumption for fiscal year 2022. And my guess is that Sheila and her staff and my budget staff are going to be looking at that the budget to actual variance and looking to see if there should be any corresponding reduction for fiscal year 2022.
Yeah, my guess would be the money that was allocated to expand the program, not only would it not have been needed, but I would have guessed that the spending in the regular program would have dropped, significantly as rides and transportation, dropped with all the shelter in place requirements. So I don't know that we know the answer, all the numbers to address it any further, except it'd be worth following up on just so that we understand how that money ended up, where that money ended up that came out of that particular approval.
Good suggestion.
Sure, and we can definitely, during the next committee meeting in May, I believe, I'll follow up with Sheila and have essentially a budget to actual analysis of what was budgeted versus what's actually happened year to date, so the committee can see what the variance is.
Right, and that would be a general request, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so shall we move on? Any other questions, everyone?
I see it wouldn't come.
Oh, so your hand is up now because you.
It's actually up. I'm going to take it down myself.
Okay, so Rich Hedges, what would you like to ask?
Well, I just wanted to thank Sheila for the Get Around program. That's the taxi program. Ready Wheels is oversubscribed, and it's often late, not for its own fault. It drives the medical people crazy because people often sit around, especially wheelchair-bound people, waiting for them to get there because just the nature of the way the service works. I regularly attend the PCC meetings, which is the version of Ready Wheels meeting with that particular community. And this has done a lot for people, and I'm not surprised that it was getting well subscribed. And I want to thank you, and I think it's a vital program.
Yeah, I didn't imply anything about the value.
Oh, no, I'm not, Vince, I'm not thinking. I just wanted to make sure that.
General, thank you.
I thought it was a wonderful program.
Okay.
I wasn't inferring you were against it.
Okay, yeah, I think it's a great program.
And thank you, Sheila, for your presentation too.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, Azalea.
Great. The last project here is the storm drain condition assessment. We have hundreds of miles of storm drains that we maintain throughout the year so that they actually work and don't create flooding issues. We have relied on a master plan that was completed back in 2004. And so it's rather dated. So we actually have a very, very strong need to inspect and assess the condition of our storm drain system. We have also embarked on a funding analysis to try to figure out, as many of you know, stormwater management is what we all refer to as unfunded. We rely on the general fund to really for the monies that are required for us to continue to maintain and make improvements. With such an outdated master plan, and for us to be able to really assess the future capital needs, we do have to inspect the entire storm drain system and assess, and then work with consultants in recommending improvements. So we anticipate this effort taking between 2 to 4 years. And the request here is for your support in using Measure S funds so that we can kickstart this effort in the amount of $250,000, which would allow us to hire the consultants, the contractors to do this work for that 1 year.
Questions for Azalea? Okay, I have a question, just adding everything up. Is it my understanding that all three of these can be done for the 800, or is?
That's a great segue to the last slide.
Okay.
So at the maximum range, at the high end of the range for the restroom phase 4, in order to do all three projects, that would be $945,000. So we have about $145,000 more in ask than we do available capacity.
And what is the recommendation of staff as to how to reconcile?
So at least for the restrooms, we ask that the committee approve a range on that. And essentially, we can do all three if we narrow the range. But again, I do want to honor Sheila's comments that we want to maintain consistency with what has already been done with the other phases of the restroom improvements.
So Sheila, would you recommend doing 2 out of the 3, but keeping it at the higher level?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, for me, I think being able to maintain the same materials that have been proven to be really successful is really important. And so if it meant that we had to defer one of the restrooms, I would choose whatever are the 2 worst restrooms to get to first.
Okay. Thank you.
Let me ask a different question. So what the committee is charged with doing is allocating or making its recommendation decision about from these proposals, which to fund or to what level. So there's no opportunity to consider with this 800,000 that's available any other projects at this time, or is that not true?
These are the projects
if I had one, for example, that I would want to have considered among these others to have Public Works look at or consider, does that opportunity exist or not?
So go ahead, Rich.
Oh, I was going to say, based on the priorities that were identified as a part of Measure S, these are the projects that fit within those parameters. Now, if there are other projects that come to mind, I think now is the time to express them.
Let me take a couple minutes just to describe one that comes to mind, and she'll know exactly what I'm probably going to say. So last year, the city of San Mateo was applied for and was certified as an age-friendly city. They endorsed a couple projects that are moving forward right now as phase 1 projects. One of them being a safe sidewalk, pedestrian safe walking routes for pedestrians, because the feedback from all of the focus groups and everything that was done, that was a major issue for so many seniors and people with disabilities and so on, the condition of our sidewalks. So we've spent a lot of time looking into what the existing 15-year sidewalk repair plan is, what work is being done. When we met with, and I met with Matt Zucca to talk about this project, which he supports, by the way, and has helped given us some information that we're using to analyze this. The concern that I have is we're on a track that by the start of the fiscal year, we're going to have recommended, based on the consultant's analysis that's in progress for the ADA work that's going to be done. That report may be out already. It's supposed to be first quarter this year. And they've done all this analysis of the condition of all of the pedestrian walkways in addition to the streets in this entire city. So they will have identified which ones are the worst condition and need to be repaired. there's no funding plan at this point. When Sheila gave us in the on the task force that I was a member of, the guidance that to get these projects approved by the city, they needed to not be projects that took a lot of money. And we certainly factored that in. So our project is aimed at prioritizing not only the repair of the worst sidewalks in the city that the consultant will tell us what they are, but we on our project are identifying where all the concentrations of senior housing is in the city of San Mateo, property by property, looking at census tract data to see where the concentrations of seniors are, mapping routes from those concentrations of seniors to common destinations, shopping districts, medical facilities, parks, and recreation, et cetera. And we're gonna have these mapped routes that say, here's what needs to, where seniors go in what numbers and so on. And we're gonna be able to pair that with the consultant's data that says, which ones of these are in the worst condition. And then the next step is, and Matt Zucca is welcoming that data because he doesn't know how he'd prioritize all of this stuff when it comes in through this report. What I see is we turn this data over to the city. The city knows now to make it to fulfill an age-friendly commitment needs to repair the sidewalks that are in the worst condition where the most seniors will benefit from them citywide in these pockets. And there's no money to do the repair of those sidewalks, then we're going to be sitting without the ability to really carry that project forward. I don't know how much money it would cost because I don't know exactly what the condition of those sidewalks are yet. Although all the people on the focus groups and so on apparently walk ones that are in pretty bad condition. So anyway, my suggestion, request would be that if there is an opportunity within this total budget to allocate $100,000 or something that would be able to take care of the highest priority sidewalk repairs that are on the senior needs to support the age-friendly priority of the city. This is a great opportunity because it's a one-time done deal. The rest of them that are not the top priority could just fit in the normal sidewalk repair schedule or be funded separately. It's truly, fits this need, mode and timing beautifully. So anyway, that's my pitch. I hear silence.
I'd like to say something.
Rich.
A couple things. First, thank you for that, Vince. I actually agree with you. I don't know that we could do any money now because we don't know what we need. But can I make a recommendation and see if the committee thinks it's a good idea? And if we can even do it without it being agendized. We might be able to because we're talking about money and projects, that we have Measure S committee with Public Works bring back an estimate for this at the next round of funding. And we look at funding this because part of what we're required to do under Measure S, the police, the parks, the library, flood control, and streets. And I think sidewalks go along with streets. So I don't think it's outside the realm of what Measure S is tasked to do. So how would you feel about that, Vince?
Yeah, I don't know when that would be, and whether this is the second time we've had an opportunity to have some funds available to allocate to things that are outside the normal process. So I don't know whether that'll ever happen again, or it may become a regular thing. I hope, but I didn't know whether there was any opportunity at all for it to be considered now. I was kind of hoping maybe it would have been brought forward from Public Works to this opportunity, since it is a one time only. But if it isn't now with these funds, and that doesn't make sense, having it on the record as a commitment to bring it back when the data is available, I'm fine with that.
And also the 0.8. There's a big difference between 0.800 and 0.865. I mean, if you're looking for $100,000, there may
I have no idea how much, because until we know how many of the worst condition sidewalks are on the, well, it's going to go the other way around. We're going to look at all the major senior routes, and then we're going to look at the consultant's data to see what's the condition of the sidewalks on those routes, and how do we prioritize them over the neighborhoods that might be in the program. The original program in 2008, I read the administrative report when this was set up. They didn't determine what the priorities for the sidewalk repair program were by, you know, how much traffic they get. They did tree counts, and they just figured logically that the neighborhoods that have the most trees probably have the most sidewalk issues from lifting and root damage. So, you know, logically that made some sense. But now we have an opportunity to do it based on age-friendly criteria and a commitment from the city to do this project. So it's an opportunity that somehow the funding is going to need to come out of somewhere to do this in the first round. So if it's not in the budget to take, if nothing's in the regular operational budget, then this would have been a place to get it.
If I may, if I could add some information. Indeed, we are working on an ADA transition plan. We also do have the sidewalk repair program, but as you noted, it's focused on tripping hazards and the focus is on trees. However, we are in addition to the ADA transition plan, which has not been completed yet, we are working on really taking a complete streets approach. So as we do street resurfacing projects, we assess ADA issues, we incorporate improvements through that program, and we also are working on making, you know, one of the priorities that City Council at their Blue Sky session gave to us is really to prioritize pedestrian and bicycle safety measures. So we are taking a more comprehensive approach to our street program. I think the ADA transition plan will really help us. We are not ready with that plan. So during the next round, during the next fiscal year, you know, everything becomes a priority, as you said. And in terms of setting the criteria, we will come back and assess how we can fund these projects, because we will be competing for general fund. We will be, you know, we've got gas tax that, as you saw, is that those revenues are getting lower, but we are taking more of a complete streets approach. So we will be back as we finish the ADA transition plan and reprioritize.
And when do you think that might be, Azalea?
That's on an annual basis. So just as we're coming to you now, we go through the CIP, really the CIP process, and Rich, you can correct me. I know it's been really on a 2-year cycle. We try not to have, but given COVID and where we are, we do make adjustments, prices, you know, we have our set budgets, but as you saw with the restroom projects, costs do change. And so we're always trying to get ahead of it, but this year has been difficult. Costs have been increasing because of it's hard to assess, but COVID has had an impact on materials and contractors. But we do an annual review of our needs, and we go through the CIP process. It's been, Rich, it's been on a 2-year basis. Right? We work on our operating budget, although this last year, right, the approach has changed.
Right, due to the volatility of the impact of COVID on the global economy, we've shifted to a 1-year budget, correct?
And Rich Hedges, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I'm ready to make a motion if people feel like it's timely.
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? Okay, then Rich, why don't you make a motion?
Okay, I'm going to try. I'm going to try to bring everything into it. So, starting with the restrooms, I would make a motion. And before Rich suggested it, I was thinking about a sliding scale. So I believe the number was 148,000 to 480,000. I would propose that, leaving up the total amount to the project to the city council and fully funding the other, was it 3 projects? And fully funding the other 3 projects as requested.
So that is, if I can just clarify, the other 3 projects are the gender
Joinville.
neutral, right, Joinville, and the sewer
Yes,
watch, and then the sidewalks.
right. Then if I can get a second on that, I've got a question on these, on it's actually not sewer, it's well, I guess it is, but it's sanitary sewer.
Rich,
Storm.
can I ask you, see if I understood? So if you fully fund the Joinville and 215 and the sewer related inspection at 250, that's 465. So with 800,000 available, are you saying that your motion would recommend a range of 145 to 335, which takes it up to the 800 total?
No, I'm going to recommend the whole thing and leave that up to the city council.
Oh, okay,
That was part of my motion, yeah.
I see.
But then for the age-friendly sidewalks, where does that fit in?
That'd be a separate motion,
Separate, okay.
suggesting that it would be brought back to the Measure S when available. I don't think we can put that in the same motion.
Okay. Does anyone want to make a second or introduce a different motion?
Is that the right, Rich, it's okay to do that, to let city council just take it, fully fund all 3? Because the other option is to fund, if we want to recommend 800,000, or that's the amount that's available from Measure S, we could do fully fund the 2 other projects at 465 and 335 to the restrooms. And if it takes more than that, the city can allocate more than that out of other sources. They're not going to come out of Measure S from that way. So
I understand what you're saying. The reason I left it making the city make a decision was I knew that we had a shortfall and they're going to make that decision anyway. This is just a recommendation.
I see. Yeah.
So if you'd like to do it that way, and you wanted to second it, I would trim it, but I wanted to give the Park and Rec the ability to have the whole ball of wax if the city decided they wanted to do it that way.
I see. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I will make a second to Rich Hedges' motion.
Pardon me, Madam Chair. If I could just get a clarifying statement on what exactly the motion is. If Mr. Hedges could please phrase the motion as I am making a motion to, followed by the recommend, whatever the committee would like to recommend.
Okay, I'll restate it. I recommend
Thank
the
you.
148,000 to 480,000 sliding scale for the restrooms with fully funding the other projects. I think it's what, 3 other projects? 2, 3? Help me, Rich.
So 2 projects. There's the Joinville
3 total.
gender neutral restrooms and the storm stormwater.
I particularly am interested in the gender neutral because I think that's something that's really needed.
And am I splitting hairs by saying, are we talking about 800 or 845, or there's a lot of money after the 8 potentially?
I would
So
say those are our recommendations to the ability of the Measure S funding, based on the city council's desires.
Okay. And Rich Lee, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I was just going to, if I understood you correctly, you're just asking, is the available capacity 800 or is it 845? It's 800.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I'd like to ask a clarifying question about the motion. The sliding scale for the restrooms, it would leave open the possibility of either going with like 2 of them and leaving the third for a time when like materials could be, the best possible materials could be purchased, or going with like 3 of them with lower quality materials. Is that right?
Actually, I'm doing it based on, my motion is based on what Ms. Kinsian had requested, which was the best material. I think for the reasons she stated, a hedge against vandalism and just the ability to sanitize or disinfect non-porous material makes more sense. And if you can get graffiti paint off with wiping it off, it's certainly not porous material.
So you're saying go with the best possible materials, and if
Right.
that means funding only
Leave it up to the city what they desire to do.
Erin, do you need any clarification?
Yes, please, if we could just have a clear motion for the record.
Okay, I make a motion that we fund the restroom upgrades between 148,000 and 480,000 based on the city council's desire, and fully fund the other 2 projects, which are Joinville and
Sewer.
the sewer. And then I have a question on the sewer. And I assume that the second is still in play.
Second?
Yeah, you made the second.
Oh, the second for motion, yeah.
Yeah.
Erin, does that give you the clarification you need?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you.
Okay, great.
Now my question is that the sewer tax, that's what it's euphemistically called, the sewer tax, it's a levy actually, I think, that we're paying for, also has some stormwater money in it. Is there not money in that to do these the stormwater work we're talking about?
Committee Member Hedges, when you say a sewer tax, do you mean our sanitary sewer rates?
Right, yes.
Yes, so no, so this is the storm drain. So storm drain, we rely heavily on the general fund, and you know, and Measure S can fund storm drain improvements as well. The sewer is focused on sanitary sewers.
But aren't we focusing on collecting some of this material at the county grounds?
That is part of that's the underground flow equalization system project, and that is the sanitary sewer project. It's a wet weather management.
Okay,
so that is funded through the sewer rates.
Okay. So that money, then none of that, if there's an overflow, would be available for this other work.
No, that is the challenge with storm drain projects. We call them unfunded mandates. So there is no mechanism for us at this point to really have a fee, although we're evaluating that as well. But yes, we rely heavily on the general fund and Measure S.
Yeah, unfortunately, that with what may be coming next summer and after as little rains we're getting, we may not be using as much water, which will limit those funds.
Yes.
So
it's a challenge.
Okay.
So then that's my motion. I have no other questions.
Okay, and I will second that motion. Are there any other motions to be made or comments?
Madam Chair, if I may, I just want to make sure I'm capturing the motion correctly. The motion is to fund the restroom upgrades between 148 and 480,000 based on the council's desire to fully fund the Joinville Center gender neutral amenities, public works, storm drain conditions assessment. And I'm sorry, was there one more?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Okay. Thank
All
you.
right. Then I think if there are no other motions or comments, we
Call
can.
for question.
Yep. So Erin, if you could do a roll call.
Of course. Committee Chair Nash,
Yay.
Vice Chair Hedges,
Yes.
Committee Member Shu,
Aye.
Committee Member Morgan. Committee Member
Yes.
Morgan, thank you. Committee Member
Yes.
Simonides.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Okay.
Madam
Great.
Chair,
Yes, Rich.
I would like to venture a motion to direct staff, when available, bring back to Measure S funding for sidewalk improvements based on our past discussion tonight on the need for improving sidewalks, especially for senior access and disabled access.
And I would just add to
Is
that,
that
I would add to that as within the greater context of the work that's being done on the ADA plan, so that we have the context.
I accept that.
Okay.
Is that something you would like, Vince?
Yeah, that's fine. I think putting it in the context of both the ADA project and the H-friendly city, projects. They're both, those two things are going to drive, I think, the prioritization of the particular sidewalks that need to be taken care of.
Then I would insert those two terms in my motion.
Right.
Okay, is there a second on?
I'll second it.
Great. All right, any other discussion before we vote on the motion? No, then Erin, could you take a roll call, please?
Okay, and just to confirm the motion, this is a motion to bring back Measure S funding for sidewalk improvements for ADA plans.
And
And the
It's not just the ADA plan won't address the specific prioritization of routes for where the senior concentrations of housing are in the city. So it has to be done in the context of both the ADA plan and the H-friendly city project.
so that's what we're looking for.
So we'd like to understand what it would take and what's the recommendation of city staff to address sidewalk repairs, enhancements based on senior needs, but the recommendation in context of the overall ADA plan work and the H-friendly cities work that's
Exactly.
going on.
Right.
So that we understand any request or recommendation in the larger context of those two other pieces of work.
Takes a village to make a motion.
Right. And we have, oh, there we go. Rich, you're making two. Okay, well, he obviously is very interested in our opinion on this particular subject.
Neither one of us vote.
Okay,
Okay, so Erin, is it clear for you?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. And I'm sorry, that was seconded by
That
Committee
was
Member Jimenez.
yeah.
Okay, all right, I'll go ahead and do a roll call vote then. Committee Chair Nash,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hedges,
Yes.
Committee Member Shu,
Aye.
Committee Member Morgan,
He is no longer here, it appears.
okay, I'll note that for the record, thank you.
Thomas, he was having problems, so he may pop back in.
Okay, I'll go ahead and convince with the remainder of the vote. Committee Member Simonitis.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 4-0. Mr. Morgan was absent from the vote.
Great, thank you. All right, then we're finished with that. Then we're going to move on to the old business of current CIP projects funded by Measure S and get an update. And we probably have had some discussion about that already, but Rich, is that your presentation?
That'll actually be from our acting public works director, Azalea Mitch.
Yeah, great. Okay, Azalea, we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Great. So can you see my screen?
Yep.
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback. You know, it's hard to look at the screen and make sure that you are seeing the same thing. So yes, this is our Public Works opportunity to update you on the projects that you have funded in the past. You have been very supportive of our Smooth Streets program. This is an effort that we undertook back in 2013. This is a program that focuses on our failed streets. We've got engineering parameters that we use to evaluate the condition of our roadways. So back in 2013, the City Council made it a priority for us to focus on the streets that were in the worst condition, and that really focused on 22 miles of failed streets. So we have repaired, since then, we have repaired about half. We have 11 miles remaining, and we have 5 contracts that we are planning through 2025 to really address all the remaining miles of streets. So we are currently under construction, and that Chair Diaz-Nash is living through some of that effort. But we're underway to complete that at the end of the year, and then we are designing phase 2, and we will do phases 3 and 5 through 2025. So as you can see, this is an ongoing effort. It is our largest ongoing program. So it's on an annual basis. But the Smooth Streets program specifically focused on these failed streets. And then we have our pavement management program that is the annual program, so that we prevent the streets from failing. So,
Rich, do you have a question? Your hand's raised. Rich Hedges? Nope. Nope. Okay, away it goes. So anyone else have a question? Because before I ask mine? Nope. Okay, Azalea, so we've talked in the past that really this doesn't end in 2025, because even though there's a pavement management program, there are going to be additional streets that turn into failed streets. So how are you thinking about that in your long-range budgeting?
yes, so thank you for your question. We did present to council a few weeks ago on where we are with the Smooth Streets program, as well as the pavement management program. I think we have different scenarios. It is definitely more cost effective for us to invest in our streets that are in fair condition and to prevent them from actually failing. The scenarios range between 15-year capital budget between 96 million to 140 million, in that range. So we will continue to assess our priorities, but we will be coming back to council, and this is done through the CIP process, and really prioritize this. This really hits what we need in terms of our foundation for complete streets. When our streets are in good condition and not failed, we can implement other projects such as bicycle and pedestrian improvements. So we will be coming back to council with our priorities. So indeed, once and hence the presentation now in 2021, because the strategy will require additional funding so that this approach is more cost effective in the long run. The Smooth Streets program, we did issue bonds in 2020. It was almost $22 million in bonds, supported by revenues from Measure S. But we're hoping that the direction from feedback or from council really supports additional funding, so that we can just implement a more cost-effective approach. So more to come on that, but that was our update a few weeks ago to council on where we are and the scenarios for this ongoing program.
Okay, thank you. And just a point of clarification. If, let's say, you are just incredibly successful and your team is able to manage optimally the streets under pavement management, as opposed to having streets fall into failed state, there could come a time when there are none or very few failed streets. And,
yes.
And that money, I guess the question is, what's the definition of what Measure S monies could then be put toward? as far as streets are concerned?
Well, that is, so we presented, so it is a complicated question because oftentimes we need more funding at the beginning so that we address some of those streets that haven't completely, aren't failed, but maybe are in poor condition. And that requires additional money at the beginning. So it's hard for me to say what we would come back for on an annual basis, because it depends on the surveys that we do annually to really assess the condition of the streets and then to prioritize. And that's how we gauge what the budget should be for that year. It depends really on the street segments. But right now, what we shared with council is really the scenarios that we would need in the very near future to support additional funding so that we can maintain our roadway system with no failed streets.
Sure. Yeah, I guess, thank you. Part of what my question was more the definition of Measure S, what's can be included and what can't be. Because if you do a good job, which I'm assuming you and your staff want to do, then there are fewer and fewer failed streets. So could that money be used for pedestrian and bicycle? I mean, and that may not be anything that you can answer right now, or maybe that's a rich question.
But so what I can say is absolutely. I mean, that approach is, I know I keep talking about complete streets, but really the approach that we are taking is looking at opportunities where we can implement multiple projects and address multiple priorities from council. So I guess I do not, in a theoretical world, yes, any future savings could be implemented on other projects. Absolutely. But it will require additional funding so that we're not back in this situation where we have miles of failed streets.
Right. Okay, great. I would encourage that to happen when and if we get to a point where we can. Thank you. Any other questions before Azalea moves on?
Yes, I do.
Yes, Rich.
I just wanted to address just the discussion just now. I ran the Measure S campaign, and we sent out 3 different missives to people telling them what the money was going to be used for. Because we didn't want to have to get a 2/3 majority, even though we did, we ran it under a general fund, which only requires a majority. So I guess a better way to put it, if you tell people what you're going to spend it on, it takes a 2/3. If you don't tell them what you're going to, and when I say tell them, you put it in the initiative. So one of the reasons the Measure S committee was formed was to oversee that promise, to make sure the money wasn't spent on other things. Mm-hmm. So we have a narrow scope of what we can spend it on. That's why I brought up the conversation about sidewalks are actually a mode of transportation next to the street. I think they can be included, but we can't go too far afield from that.
Sure.
And I think bicycle lanes could be included in that, actually.
Absolutely. Great, thank you for that. All right then, any other questions, comments? No? All right, Azalea, back to you.
All right, so now on to the Columbia Crystal Springs Storm Drain Project that was funded. This is a storm drain segment that actually is both in a pipe and a storm drain, and also as open channel flow. We have had localized flooding and property damage. So the status of this project, as you can see, this is the channel. It's between homes, and it's between Crystal Springs Road and Columbia. So not an easy location. So we have had a few challenges with this project. We have found quite a few other utilities that are in conflict. So we're currently investigating those and trying to see how we can get the flow under some of these conflicts. So we're doing more in field investigations on this, and we're in the process of developing a conceptual design that will then lead to a full design. We anticipate the construction to begin in the summer of next year. And that also has to go through an environmental permitting process. The cost for this are $1.5 million, and we will get a more definite cost once the design is completed and once we go through the environmental permitting process.
Okay, thank you.
So that is underway.
Rich, do you have a question or is your hand raised from last time?
Last time.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Azalea.
Thank you. And the last update for you is on our neighborhood traffic management. So, once again, we're trying to take a much more comprehensive approach to our projects. Our neighborhood traffic management really focuses on improvements to make our streets safer for bicyclists and pedestrians. We conduct studies and we implement traffic calming devices and also try to optimize our traffic signals. So what we have completed this last year, we installed curb extensions. And we really like these. This is a picture on Delaware. These are curb extensions. And as you can see here, when we make these improvements, we can also incorporate the ramps. So for ADA compliance, these really help in slowing traffic down. And then we have an opportunity here for some green infrastructure. So quite a few benefits. So curb extensions were installed on Delaware 5th and 9th. We made crosswalk improvements on 31st. We implemented some of the measures in the traffic action plans, like the speed cushions and the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Those are the lights that you can press as you're crossing on certain crosswalks that are highly effective at stopping vehicles, and also signage to provide drivers with feedback on how fast they're going. So we've also implemented throughout the city signing and striping improvements. All of these stem from the traffic action plans, and these are neighborhood based. And we have also conducted reports and studies and meeting time and effort. So that is what we have completed. Ongoing projects here, and let me make sure that let me change my view so I can actually see what I wrote here. But we are in the process of building we're getting ready to implement a bicycle boulevard on 28th. We're also designing curb extensions and crosswalk improvements on Parrot and Alameda to really focus on that safety once again with pedestrians. We will be starting the traffic action plan for New Laurelwood and conducting the origin destination studies for San Mateo Village. So we continue to work with our neighborhoods, and in Sugarloaf, we will be looking at that intersection at Parkwood and De Anza for crosswalk striping and the flashing, the beacons and curb extensions as well. So we, as I mentioned before, our council is prioritizing bicycle and pedestrian safety improvements. And I think with the traffic action plans and funding from Measure S, we have definitely been able to work with our neighborhoods and to do what we can to implement these projects.
Rich Hedges, do you have a comment, question?
Yeah, I actually have a question, and I apologize if you're not prepared for this, but it just came to mind. Two of us, Naomi and myself, sat on the Transportation Authority Measure A advisory committee, and the bicycle plans for 28th Street at Caltrain became an issue, and I know the city was going to be reworking that to the best of their ability. Do you have anything to tell us about that? And did it cost a lot of extra money?
So we have been working with Caltrain on this, and I will have to get back to you on the full details. But yes, we are we are looking at that. There are gaps in our master plan, and if I may update you as well, we are working on an interactive bicycle map that will be up on our website so that you can see the segments that we're focusing on and working on. But yes, indeed, we are working through the issues with Caltrain, and I can definitely email you the details on that.
I can add to that, Rich. There was a meeting, a public meeting, meaning like, people who had been concerned about that specific issue, and it was scheduled for January, but it has been postponed, but it will happen. It is still supposed to happen.
Okay. And
Thank
Zelia,
you.
if you could give me a call sometime at your convenience, I want to talk to you about that interactive bicycle map, because my neighborhood has been ignored in an issue with the original bicycle map. I think we've got it right now. Caused us to have to hire an attorney because of somebody going after us based on a bicycle map. I don't want to get into the weeds on this, but I want to make sure you because you're fairly, at least as running the department, you're fairly new. And I just want to get you up to speed on it so we don't continue to have to waste Sean's time.
Absolutely, I will. And I very much appreciate your patience. I've been in this role for 5 weeks.
I know.
So there's a lot to catch up, and it's been a roller coaster. I had been, I've had been overseeing I still am, the clean water program and field maintenance. But yes, the CIP side of the house I'm catching up. So I appreciate that patience.
Yeah, just one other comment, if you might allow it, Chairman.
Yes.
I was very pleased, and Naomi, I think, knows this, that on the Measure A bicycle paths grants, I think 4, maybe 6 years ago, we got money for doing along San Mateo Drive to Burlingame. Now we've extended the bicycle path all the way to the Millbrae train station. So we now along San Mateo and California Drive have the bike path from the San Mateo train station all the way to the Millbrae train station. So we're making some progress.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other comments? Rich, your hand went up again. Oh, no, it's gone again. Okay. Azalea, I was just interested in any further detail you can provide about the Parrot Alameda project, because that, there was a lot of community input, and then it was supposed to go in for design, and then COVID hit, and lots of questions.
Yes, absolutely. The survey was done. We are currently looking at phase 1. So this project will be implemented in 2 phases. So phase 1, if you can bear with me in terms of the my understanding is, yes, we have full funding for phase 1, and that includes doing the replacing white posts and with planter boxes. So the anticipated date here is for what I got from staff is later this year, but later meaning spring, early summer of 2021. So that is phase 1, and
So
we still have to.
Is that beginning or completing the project?
That is beginning the project based on the feedback from the neighborhood surveys.
Yep. Okay,
And
so
then,
it's early summer. Thank you.
yes, and phase 2, that is under design. So that won't be implemented until probably 2022.
Yep. Okay. Thank you very much for that update. Any other questions on this page for Azalea? Don't see anything. So that's the end. Is that your last slide?
That was it.
That was it. Okay. Excellent. So thank you, Azalea, very much. Very, very helpful. We're all going to be very interested in.
Yep, thank you.
in what happens, obviously. And as the city council talks with staff about whether we fund individual traffic action plans or whether it's, as was the recommendation, to have it be more prioritized based on where the hotspots are, not necessarily neighborhood by neighborhood. I think this committee would be very interested in staying updated on that, because that, obviously impacts a lot of what goes on here.
Absolutely.
Great.
Thank you for your feedback. Take that back to staff.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions about old business before we move on to reports and announcements? No? Okay, then reports and announcements. Does anyone have anything they would like, relevant, that they would like to share with the committee? I guess the one thing I would add, which Azalea alluded to earlier, that there has been a lot of work in my neighborhood with the smooth streets, which is a great effort. But I think one thing it identified is that we could do a better job in community outreach all the way through, particularly when plans change, because Mother Nature, you discover something and you didn't realize it, and you have to go back and retool or re-engineer. And I think the city and the staff and the contractors have been great about doing that. But I would just ask that there be a checklist or something put onto every project, that if there is a change based on unexpected consequences or findings, that there is a specific tangible communication piece that is added to that, because I think that that would make the city look better, make the residents feel better, and would probably minimize city staff time in having to answer a whole lot of one-off questions and complaints. So I just think it's good planning. So,
If I may ask, could I ask for what is the, we do have our process does involve knocking on doors and placing door hangers if people are not home. But I always ask when we have community meetings, for example, what is the most effective way to communicate with residents? Because we have our social media channels. With construction, we do, like I said, knock on doors and put door hangers on. But if we could get feedback, especially with this that happened last week, what would have helped?
well, just in this particular scenario, and other people may have other suggestions, the door hangers, everybody acknowledged that all happened, which was great. That was sort of starting the project off and saying, you're going to be, inconvenienced from this period to that period. But it was the sort of in the moment, oops, we discovered something that's going to require a lot more work than what we thought. And so I would suggest a couple things. Number one, knocking on doors for sure. Number two, working with the homeowners associations throughout the city, because they oftentimes will have phone trees or emails or things that could be helpful to you. And they also know the people in the neighborhoods who are most influential, sort of the spreaders who could get out and help as well. So I would suggest adding that, because something like what happened was you have to turn on a dime. You can't wait a week and print up door hangers, because it would have been all over. So, just really getting out in that particular case, knocking on doors, putting something in the door handle, plus going to the HOAs probably would have been a good suggestion. Any other thoughts from anybody else?
No, I agree with what you said. The HOAs are a vehicle, to get information out, at least to all of its members quickly. So we don't usually get those, and it's not, I think the problem is that there's a lot of HOAs in the city that are not part of that citywide homeowners group. So trying to develop some, more comprehensive list would probably probably be helpful in the long term. So you know exactly where those all are.
Right. And I think that that's something there's an effort to try and do that right now
Oh, yeah.
between city staff and SMUBA for that very reason. So, okay, any other comments, questions? I don't see any. Well then, with no further, I would like on behalf of the committee to thank Azalea, thank Sheila, thank everyone who was here who helped present, and call the meeting adjourned at 7:57 p.m. And thank you, Rich and Aaron, for your ongoing support.
Thank you.
All
Good
right.
night,
Thank you,
Good night.
everyone.